He had just raised his current shotgun. He saw a vampire fall from the sky. Unfortunately, Bud shot him dead. Soon all the vampires are out in force. The hunting teams are using their best skills. The garlic eater scalded the vampire with his spit and threw a smoke bomb filled with garlic gas. The vampires who had just entered the room struggled and danced wildly. Then the older brother asked the older brother for a bullet. The two brothers perform a fancy aerial relay. Just as Bud tells David to stay away from the wall, but he was dragged away by a vampire who had broken through the wall. David's first attempt to help, but then the air vent. Suddenly a dancing vampire with nimble limbs appears. David rushes to shoot, but he did not know how to use this sudden situation. The panicked David directly scared the piss out of him. Soon the two danced a duet in place. It was a hoot. Bud was confronting the 2-meter-tall vampire, but he was knocked up to the second floor with a punch. In an emergency, Bud calls for David to hand him a weapon. Soon Bud jumped down from the second floor. He catches the weapon from David. No time to load it, but the gun as a hammer also works well. One more move, a blow to the head of the incoming vampire, and break her body. And that was it. A room full of vampires was easily taken care of by 4 people. The brother looked at the harvest and exclaimed, "We're rich." The oldest brother looked at Bud David's crotch, but David was used to peeing his pants. Just as the 4 Buds were celebrating their victory, suddenly a white-faced vampire rushed out. Bud raises his spray gun and fires a shot, but the vampire who was shot and fell to the ground. The vampire got up and fled without fear of the sun. Buddy was incredulous. Bud told him, "Vampires have invented a sunscreen that helps them survive in the sun for half an hour." Meanwhile, David accidentally discovers there are actually 5 species of vampires in the house, and this is an extremely rare occurrence. But Bud didn't have time to think about it. He had to go pick up his baby girl to finish the job. When he was taking his daughter to a party, suddenly received a strange phone call and met with a one-eyed man. Bud realized the situation was not good, quickly pulled his daughter into the car, fastened her seatbelt and put on her headphones, and took out his tablet. Bud walked to the back of the car. At that moment the one-eyed man approached. Bud made a sharp turn. The one-eyed man was killed. As the racing game continues, Bud stepped on the gas, and the vampire had a car chase with the vampire. The drivers sent by the vampire failed one after another. Finally Bud was pushed to the end. He walked towards the car and drove the speeding enemy. He simply blew out the 4 tires of his car, lowered the chassis of the car. He successfully drilled through the bridge and left in style. The enemy's SUVs were out of reach. Bud fled home with his daughter in a hurry, but as soon as he opened the door, his daughter was grabbed by men in black. Bud was also controlled by 2 big men. It turns out that the vampire boss has been waiting for a long time. Soon the boss took away Bud's wife and daughter. Before he left, he looked at David, who was on the ground. Then she told Bud to wish him luck. Then she threw him to the ground and knocked him out. When Bud woke up from his sleep, David, who was covered in blood, also woke up, but he felt strange in his own body. Bud gestures to him. He told him to look in the mirror and see his teeth. While David was looking in the mirror, Bud touched his own knife. David looked at himself in the mirror. His face is horrible and fading fast. He realized that he had been turned into a vampire. Bud knew very well that the newly transformed vampire was desperate for blood. He could lose control at any moment, and so it was. The transformed David was filled with energy, and his sense of taste became extremely acute. Bud was there to reassure him that everything is going to be okay. Just as David was checking to see if he had peed his pants this time, his whole body suddenly became very strange. Soon a strong feeling of hunger came over him. Bud actually liked this little brother. When he felt sorry for him, suddenly David's hand moved. It turns out that his breed of vampire is not afraid of severing his head. They just put their heads back in place. Another vampire with this ability was Lucy, one of Bud's female neighbors. She was the one who revealed the information about Bud's wife and daughter to the female boss. But after a friendly exchange with Bud, she decided to tell Bud the truth. Only then did Bud understand the reason why the boss wants to take revenge on him. Because the old lady he hunted and killed was the daughter of a female vampire. She wanted Bud to feel the pain of losing his daughter. But Bud is not to be trifled with either. Soon, 1 and 2 vampires arrive at the secret lair of the boss lady. Lucy went straight for the jugular. Bud and David were on a killing spree, but there were too many of them. Machine gun fire was really intense. The 3 Buds could only dodge. At that moment, a black car suddenly rushed in. It was Steve, the first black cowboy with a Gatling. Steve's arrival directly changed the situation on the field. Everywhere the bullets passed, no grass was left to grow. David and Lucy stayed behind to break the back. The two men continued to explore the underground. Just as they had cleared a wave of enemies, suddenly Steve pushes Bud forward. 2 shots were fired to knock down the door. Steve was kind enough to stay behind and take the lead. Soon a horde of vampires howled and came after them. Steve opened his shirt and decided to die with the enemy. Soon Bud saw the boss woman. Without saying a word, he fired a shot. But this shot angered the vampire. She came out in her original form and rushed at Bud with great speed. It only took 2 seconds. Bud was knocked to the ground. The female boss continued to power up. She kicked Bud around like a ball, finally fell to the ground heavily. Just as she controlled Bud and was about to draw blood, suddenly a wooden stick penetrated his body. However, the boss woman was unharmed. A slap sent the woman flying. When he recovered, Bud grabbed his pistol, aimed at the vampire who was walking towards his wife, pulling the trigger. The bullet hit the woman perfectly in the back of the head, but the woman turns her head with a smile. She catches the bullet in her teeth. Bud's attack failed. This means he's the next to go. The woman rushes towards Bud in a gust of wind, but Bud didn't panic at all, because there was one skill he had tried and tested. Soon the boss woman's head was on the ground. The vampire who had lived for centuries never thought she would run herself to death on a silver-plated rope. Bud proudly put away his weapon. Looking at the valuable fangs in front of him, he couldn't have been happier. When his wife found out about Bud's status as a vampire hunter, she chose to forgive. Before he left, Bud took Steve's hat and handed it to David the vampire with all due respect. In just 1 week's time, David, the nerd, became a vampire. I don't know if that was a blessing or a curse. Just as Bud was driving away, suddenly the sewer was opened. A giant figure slowly crawls out of it.
That's what I love about LA. All the damn vampires.